Hello, my name is Michele, and you're listening to Profit is a Choice. Joining me on the podcast today is Jack Tomkins of Pineapple Consulting Firm. Jack began his career in the insurance world where he focused on analytics, financials, and building relationships. Now he works with business owners to turn their flat data into beautiful visual representations to make analyzing and understanding that data so much easier. This was a very fun conversation to have, and it seriously inspired me with the possibilities. So listen in for ideas on how to turn all that flat data into something more. Every day, empowered entrepreneurs are taking ownership of their company financial health and enjoying the rewards of reduced stress and more creativity. With my background as a financial software developer, owner of multiple businesses in the interior design industry, educator, and speaker, I coach women in the interior design industry to increase their profits, regain ownership of their bottom line, and to have fun again in their business. Welcome to Profit is a Choice. Hey, Jack, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, Michele, how are you? Thanks for having me.
Oh, I'm doing great. I'm excited to have this conversation. We had a little bit of a pre-conversation, and I always have to be careful when we do that because I'm like, oh my gosh, so much good stuff. Hold it until we get on the podcast. So
right.
I am not worried about us filling any time today having an awesome conversation.
Oh yeah, we're gonna have a blast.
So Jack, you have an awesome company and Pineapple Consulting. Is that right? Yep. Pineapple Consulting. I love it. For those that they can't see you, but you've got your pineapple shirt, you're totally repping the company, big pineapple behind you. I love it. But you didn't have, this is a newer venture for you. So this isn't something you've been doing forever. Many of my listeners are coming to their jobs or careers now as interior designers and drapery workrooms and stagers as second and third career choices, right? So they started somewhere else and it's morphed into this. I would love to hear a little bit of your journey, if you'll share with our listeners on what you did prior to Pineapple Consulting, and then what led you to start the business you have today. And then we'll move on later and talk about what you actually do. But I'm interested in the journey.
Absolutely. Yeah, it could be somewhat common for folks. So started in the corporate world and realized, hey, I want to do something on my own is the short version. The longer version is I was at an insurance company, great people, great work. And I was through like the leadership development program, did all that fun stuff. And I was an analyst in a few different capacities. So always dealing with data. And my goal as the analyst was always to make it presentable and digestible for the higher ups and my bosses and bosses and all that fun stuff. So that was all fun and great. And at one point I had to kind of decide what I was going to do for the next 3 to 5 years in the company. And it sort of hit me that this isn't really fulfilling my entrepreneurial bug that I've always kind of had. So I put some feelers out in the market and said, hey, like I can do this analytical stuff for a big business. I wonder if small businesses need the exact same thing, but just don't have the resources. So the feelers that I put out, they came back really good, and it seemed like a very necessary service. So I actually started in April of 2020. So right at the beginning of the pandemic, I went full time, and it was sort of practicing what I preach, which I know we talked about a little bit in the pre-call, of people need to know their numbers. And at a time during a pandemic, you really need to know your numbers and scrutinize every piece of it. So I figured, why not now? And it's been an awesome time since then.
The truth of the matter is, you're right. We needed to know the numbers then, but we needed to know the numbers well before then.
Right. Yeah.
But even more so, it just highlighted what we needed to know. In my own coaching practice, the minute we got shut down, if you will, in that, I think it was like, Friday the 13th of March.
Yeah, that's right.
Was kind of like, what Friday the 13th? That's why we can always remember that one. And on that Monday, March 16th, the world was different from you're not going to work, you're not going to school, everybody's at home. Right. And at the time, people thought that it was a 2-week, here's 14 days, and then we're going to go back and things are going to open up.
Right.
And I started immediately getting on with my client base and saying, okay, I called it your cash flow position. You need to know your cash flow position. I actually have a freebie out on my website if anybody's interested, but it was where are you right now? What does your cash look like? What do your numbers look like? Really digging in. All right, let's start looking at your expenses, like going through the
Right.
work that moment, not waiting. And, I had a business that I started back in 2000. And so I lived through that 2008, 9, 10 recession, and I
Right.
knew
Yeah.
what that looked like. And the people, Jack, who knew their numbers were able more quickly to pivot their business and to make decisions, sound decisions, right? Than those who didn't know. They just kind of kept hoping that it was going to be okay. Now we all had hope, but
Right.
those of us that knew our numbers and knew what to do and how low we could go and when to say yes and when to say no, we were a little bit better equipped to weather that storm than others who weren't. Like we knew what our break evens were. We knew how to keep the lights on. And we knew when we were in trouble. I think that's a big part of not knowing numbers is
Right.
not knowing when you're in trouble or how bad the
Yeah.
trouble is that you're in.
Right. Exactly. Um, and something like the 2008 and the situation now, knowing your numbers is really at the forefront, or should be at least, for so many different companies because of that. It's how low can we go, and also when times are good too. Knowing your numbers is also a great thing of how high can we go.
Exactly. What are the opportunities in front of us?
Right.
And wow, so starting a business in the year of a pandemic.
Yep.
I guess
Call
you
me
could check
crazy.
that. You could check that off the bucket list, right? If you
Yeah.
made that work.
Yeah.
Well,
Um,
and I think sometimes we don't think about it, but there is a lot of analysis that goes on with insurance companies. If we step back, we don't always think about that, but when we step back and think about it, it is a lot. I mean, there is a lot
right.
of data that flows through insurance companies, actuaries, all those types of positions that you get to step back and go, okay, what is our risk? How often does it happen? What do we have to pay out? And that's how rates are set. And that's how,
Right.
decisions are made. And it is heavy data analysis. So I
Yes.
am certain that if you did that for many years, you definitely have built up that data analysis muscle, if you will, to be
Definitely.
able to then apply it to other businesses.
Yeah. It's sort of my go-to now. It's just whenever I'm faced with any sort of problem, it's all right. Let's check out the numbers first, and that's where I start.
So let's chat about that for a second,
Yeah.
because one of the things that came up again in the pre-call was the idea of looking at empirical data versus always having a gut reaction. And I'm not saying we don't check our gut reaction to things, because sometimes there are, as I would say, flags waving, or clients giving you red flags or whatever it is. But there's also this idea that my gut tells me what I should and shouldn't do. And
Right.
then the data is not there to support it. I see that quite often where people are looking to scale. My coaching practice is focused on scaling your business. And if we are not careful, we can grow so quickly that we can't meet the need. Our brand promise falls down, our brand messaging is off. Like we have problems. I've seen where people move out of their home too quickly and move into a building. And now all of a sudden they've got these extra rent payments and they didn't think about all the extra payments they're going to have to make over here. Or now they have to staff it. So they have employees, and, it just snowballs after a while. And so it is super important, I would say, to be in touch with how we feel, but to back it up with the empirical data.
That's exactly right. I couldn't agree more. My little tagline for it is combining the art of the gut instinct and the science of data. It's
Oh, I love that.
both are totally necessary.
Yeah, because it's even like with pricing. I always say pricing our work is as much art as it is science,
Exactly.
right? There is something there. It's the difference between strategy and then tactical action. I mean,
Exactly.
so as you have taken a step into this world of looking more at building these dashboards and making these numbers and this data and analysis open for small businesses who haven't had it before, what do you see as the numbers that they most often want to look at? I mean, I understand every company has different KPIs and different things, but what are the numbers that you see kind of across the board that, like, here are 2 or 3 basics that everybody either wants to look at or should look at?
Yeah, I'm going to start real simple. It's revenue and profit. It's in every single business, and that's the telling factor of pretty much every business. And so knowing those is great. Doing a comparison, which I think you mentioned in your last podcast or one of the year-end review podcasts, is comparing against different timeframes. So revenue from last month, great, $10,000, whatever it was. How does that compare month over month? How does it compare year over year? Because that number itself is fantastic, but when you get a trend out of it, it adds a whole lot more context that can honestly just off the bat tell you from a revenue and profit standpoint, which is how your business is doing. That comparison tells you right off the bat, okay, things are good or things are bad.
Yeah, I think sometimes when we look at a number out of context, it's just a number. Kind of like when we talk about even setting goals, if you're setting a goals without a strategy, it's just a goal and there's no real tie to it. Right. And so I know that for me, the numbers that I always look at, similar to what you said, is I want to know, what is your revenue? I want to know what your gross profit is. I want to know your expenses. And then I want to know net profit. And then I take net profit and break it down even further as a profit first professional. I want to know how much is owner's compensation, how much is going to taxes, how much is going to, your 401k. Like, we're really looking at these numbers. And the analysis part I find very interesting. I have always been one. Of course, I built financial software for 10 years. So that was the way we were trained. I mean, you had to be able to analyze. It wasn't enough to just look at a number and go, that sounds like a good number. right? Which is what we do sometimes. Or, oh, what revenue do you want to have? I want to sell $100,000 or 1 million, but we don't tie it to anything else. We don't then say, and here's how profitable I want to be with that. Or here's the other numbers I need to look at. So I can work with a company that does $1 million in revenue, to your point, and makes no profit. And I can work with a company that does 100,000 in revenue and makes a profit. Which do I want? I'm going to go 100,000 in profit all day long over $1 million in headaches and no profit. And so tying different numbers together, that analysis is important. Something that I love for my clients to do, and I'm certain that you probably see in some of it, is not just doing let me back up. Many times when we look at a year, let's just talk about revenue and profits, right?
Sure.
We look at a year from January to December.
Yes.
And what I love to do is look at it from January to December, compare it to January to December of the last maybe 2 years to see where we're going. I like to look at each month. Like, let me check out October of this year. What did October of last year look like? What decisions were happening in October? So not by itself. But then I always as well love to do like a rolling year, right? So let me look at October of this year through September or October, November of last year. Sometimes I like to do 13 months instead of 12 months.
Yep. I'm so glad you said that.
Yeah. If I make a decision that I'm changing, let's say that I've changed my pricing model. Well, of course, my data is going to be skewed if I made a decision to change my pricing in July and I'm looking at everything from January through December, then it's an average. If I really want to see the changes in my financials, I need to look at July to December and compare that to July to December, not skew it, right? So it doesn't mean I don't look at it, but I'm chopping the data multiple ways. I have my clients move their quarter. Quarters aren't just January, February, and March. What about February to April? Like, let's roll them and see what they look like. And it changes the way you see everything. It's almost like we are used to looking at a picture one way and you stand to the left and stand to the right. And you see something you didn't see before. Yeah.
I'm so happy to hear you say that because it's so true. It's, January, December it's great for a lot of things. Obviously taxes is probably the biggest one and it's something that is ingrained in everybody's head. So that's a perfectly fine way to look at it. But when you do the rolling 12, 13 months, it adds such an important lens because to your point, and I was actually going to use the exact same example. If you change your pricing, or maybe a different example, you change your sales pitch and that happened in July. Okay, let's say that's the new January, quote unquote.
Exactly.
And let's look 12 months from there. How did that compare to the prior period? And being July to, I guess, June of the following year. there's nothing tying us to January to December. It's just pick the 12 months or 3 months or 6 months that make the most sense given changes in your business. And it just opens up so many new doors.
I'm not sure why we have been so ingrained other than just the calendar year and taxes are based on that. But in our industry, in the interior design, in the building industry, our builds and our designs cross years. They cross quarters. It crosses months. I mean, we're not, unless we're doing a consult or something super quick, we're looking at 3, 4, 6 months on some projects and 2 years on a home build, right? So these are not quick things. So the same way that we would look at a project across a span of months or weeks or years, we need to be able to look at our business that way.
Exactly.
And that data is not always easy to get. I'm a QuickBooks user, and I know a lot of my listeners are in QuickBooks. If not, they're also in other applications that are providing some of their financial data, but they are not all as richly not inept. They are inept. They are not as able to create rich reports in some cases that allow you to slice and dice the data. What many of these programs do is they give you the most asked for data. Here's the data most people ask for, and here's the way most people ask for it. And so that kind of keeps us in the box when we're looking at the data, because that's what we've been given, or that's what we've been told we need to look at.
Exactly. Yeah. And QuickBooks and the FreshBooks Zero, whatever you use, they're all similar in that sense of here's the most common things. And a lot of it's just what kind of invoices do you have, how many are overdue, and all that fun stuff. Important things to know, absolutely. But when you're doing a financial review or projections or anything with financials, getting it into a format that makes the most sense for you is not often the default view in QuickBooks. And one of my favorites is just pulling up the P&L in QuickBooks. Fantastic data, great numbers in there. But for a lot of people that maybe aren't loving just going through the numbers like you and I do, Michele, they're just looking at a black and white piece of paper, and it is boring. And so one of the things that I do is take that data and put it into charts and graphs and put it in their brand colors and design it so it is very custom to them. So it's actually almost a little bit fun to look at. I mean, they're all fun for me to look at, but hopefully for the client, it's actually enjoyable too. And it makes things so much easier to just jump off the screen. Doing those 12-month rolling time periods, doing a 24-month rolling time period, whatever it is, that's a huge, huge piece. I think just visualizing the data with colors, charts, indicators, things like that, it makes a huge difference.
That is so true, because I've told this story before. So back in January of 2020, one of my things was I wanted to take a watercolor class. And I've always wanted, I love painting. I'm not going to say I'm great at it. I could probably get by, but I mean, nobody would pay for my art. We're not going there, right? But it was just something I wanted to do. I felt this need to express myself. Well, I'm also very logical. I mean, that is just the way my brain works. I am left brain logical over right brain creative. I am creative, but it is secondary to my logic. I create within logical constructs. It's just the way God made me. Okay. So I go to this watercolor class, and this teacher is completely right brain creative. She's drawing stuff on the board, and then she's not walking through it linearly, which is throwing me. And so then she's like telling us to do something that's not on the board. And so then she's like, well, just make it up as you go. And I'm thinking, oh, dear goodness, this is like, it challenged me. I wasn't challenged by the painting. I was challenged by following the instructions and doing things the way she wanted to do it. And at one point she was saying to us, I want you to go paint like, I don't know, like a mountain scene. But we had nothing to look at. So we're sitting there thinking, yeah, oof is right. How do I go create this mountain scene? I don't even know if I can recreate. I'm trying to create a mountain scene in my head. And I raised my hand and I said to her, I can do a P&L and a balance sheet from memory. I could paint that.
Right.
I can't paint a mountain scene. I don't see it. I need a picture. I need something to be able to see this scene so that I can do it. I work in financials all day, every day. I can paint that, but it's going to be flat. And that's just what it's going to be.
Right.
So, right. So conversely, you go back and you move into the design world, and designers and stagers and workrooms, we are dealing with color. We're dealing with beautiful things.
Yeah.
So when they look at financials, to them, it's the equivalent of me trying to create a mountainscape out of my brain.
It's exactly
To them,
right.
it's a flat piece of paper. And I always joke when I say, did you review your financials? And they say, yes. And I said, does that mean you looked at it and said, yes, I got it and checked it off? Or does it mean that you know what you're looking at and what you're looking for? And are you able to use those numbers to assist you in moving forward? That answer, by and large, is about a 5 to 10% yes, and an 85 to 90% or 90 to 95% no.
Right. Exactly.
And what they say is, it needs to be pretty. I need pictures.
Yeah.
I need to, because they think, right, in that creative space, they think much more picture, much more color. Those pie charts and all of those graphs are easier for them to read than raw data on a piece of paper. And that is
Exactly.
okay. They
Yeah.
choose software sometimes not based on the software. And this isn't a bad thing. Software companies, if you're listening, listen up. They're not choosing software sometimes based on the functionality. They're choosing it based on how beautiful it is.
Yeah.
And that makes sense because they are working in creating beauty, right?
Right.
And so what you're doing is giving them a beautiful way to look at the data.
Exactly. Yeah. And it's so true when you're picking out a software company, and if it looks appealing, that's a huge piece of the puzzle. And that's a lot of what I do for my dashboards too, is like, I don't know, a 20% net profit margin. Is that good? Is that bad? We don't know. If you have it on a speedometer, when one side is green and one side is red and you've got yellow in the middle, and you can see that 20% is all the way in the red section, then okay, that's a clear indicator for you. And it's just things like that. Seeing your revenue or your profit over time, and the bars are getting bigger as you go from left to right, it just makes things so much easier. And especially with the interior design community, and I think most people, if they see a red X on a screen, they're going to know that that's bad. Whether you love financials like you and I do, or you hate them, something like that is pretty universal. And so it's just that visualization piece is so nice.
So I've created a few spreadsheets in Excel for my clients as they work through my programs. And in one of them, I have it where they put in their goals for the year, their financial goals. And then every month they're monitoring to the goal, not just to the number, but to a percentage, because we do a lot based on percentage, not just the number, right?
Awesome.
And I have it in Excel coded so that if they fall below the percentage, it flashes red.
Yeah.
And if it goes above the percentage, it says green, right? And so sometimes it throws them because of the numbers that they see. But the green and the red go, you're okay, or stop, whoa,
Right.
pump the brakes, baby. This is the problem. And because otherwise they look at it and they don't always know what they're looking at. So I try to, even just in a couple of small spreadsheets, give them a warning, as a warning, Will Rogers, like danger.
Yeah.
You're getting into territory here you don't want to go into.
Right,
So
exactly.
I love that idea of being able to visually see how the data works and how it's working for you. And you probably do this as well. Do you then not only create the dashboard, Jack, for them, you and your team, you create these things, do you teach them how to read it?
Yes. Yeah, because a pretty picture is great, but if you don't know what it's telling you, that's a whole nother issue. So that's sort of step 2, is going through and, okay, this is what this means. And to your point, against or measuring against budget rather, one of my common things is you have, a solid fill-in blue bar, and then like a transparent but still visible bar above that, and that total thing is your budget. So if you've got any of that transparent left, it's okay, I still need whatever it is, $5,000 more or 5% more to hit my budget. And so we'll go through things like that and how to actually play with the dashboard, because it is kind of playing, and it's very interactive. You get to pick your month, you get to pick your time frame, and you go through. And I often do things that are like, here is where this is coming from, probably mostly from QuickBooks in a lot of situations, and here's what it means. So a little comment comes out of whatever your profit is 20% against the industry standard of 23%. or something along those lines. So there's always some commentary within the dashboard that'll sort of be there after my conversation of walking through it with them.
So it kind of creates a reference point, almost like when you're reading the map and you have the guide at the bottom.
Yes.
And it kind of shows you, right, a mile is this long, so that you have a reference point for what you're doing.
That's exactly right.
Now, so when you have started working with these smaller companies and you go in and you help them create a dashboard, do you go through a discovery process, Jack, with them that says like, because here's what I'm thinking. It's not just our financials. Not like everybody knows I'm going to scream financials from the rooftops because that's what I do. And I want to encourage anybody listening who says budget, what is a budget? I don't even have a budget. In my Understanding Your Financials course, I teach you how to create a budget and how to create it from a profit and loss over the last couple of years. And I just want to say, I'm sure Jack would give me a great big exclamation on this. Having a budget is really giving you the power to tell your money how you're going to spend it instead of letting it spend itself around you. Right. And so creating that budget, it should be tied into your financial goals and plan for the year. And then Jack comes in and helps you manage it and see it and know that you have a visual representation of how that money is being promised and then how it's being spent. And so I've worked with nonprofits, I've worked with for-profits, and building that budget is so important because it's a roadmap for where you are planning to allocate the money that comes in. It's no different than saying in our home, can we buy a bigger house? Because here's the amount of salary we have. You are creating a home budget for groceries, for gifts, for all those things. And I see a lot in business, we don't do that. So I just want to jump on the budget bandwagon for a second and say, if you have not done one and you're listening to this podcast, it's not too late. Stop and go create a budget. And then it's not enough to create it. You have to update it and you have to monitor to it. And again, that's where this dashboard comes in, right? Because like you said, here's what I've budgeted for, let's say coaching. Here's what I've budgeted to work with Michele in coaching. Here's how much I've spent. Here's how much I have left to spend. Or here's how much I planned for marketing. And here's another marketing opportunity. You can start to see where those funds go up and down in a very visual way.
Exactly. And we can tie this back to one thing that we mentioned towards the beginning of this, of a goal without a strategy is just a hope, I guess.
Yeah.
And so when you build out that goal, that budget, and you say, okay, 25% is from coaching, 50% is from consulting, and the rest is from whatever. You can piece that out and you can show that in a dashboard and say, okay, here's what I'm measuring towards for this specific source of revenue or for this source of expense. And having that broken out and then measuring up to that. And it's funny, I know this is audio only, but I was sitting there nodding my head in agreement the entire time you're saying that. Measuring towards that is just, it's a whole lot easier when it's visual, and it's a really nice way to tie in your strategy, because then you can actually see the different pieces of your business and they sort of come to life as more than just that thing that you do once or twice a week. And then the second piece of that I wanted to transition into a little bit is, okay, you've spent X amount of dollars on like a business coach like yourself. What's the ROI on that for the client? And they can put some numbers around that. And I know that's something that you've talked about in other podcasts too. And I think it's a great point, because knowing the numbers is fantastic, but that really means knowing all of the numbers.
Right.
So how much did I spend? How much did I get out of it? What's the ROI? Should I keep doing it? Should I invest more in it, or should I stop doing it? When that's all laid out in front of you, it makes that call a whole lot easier to make. And that science of data piece that we mentioned is a whole lot easier to digest.
So I love that. And that's kind of where I was looking to go to. So I'm glad you started talking about that. One of the things, so I paid for a high ticket coach, I don't know, 2 or 3 years ago, to learn how to do a few things that they were doing. And I was not able to fully implement their program because they had it so time bound, and they didn't tell me that before I purchased it.
Oh, geez.
I know it frustrates me. But one thing I learned was not to ever do that to my client. So I look at it as a very high, I could probably chalk it up to an educational expense. We all do those, right?
Right.
However, I looked at what I invested in that program, even though I wasn't able to fully implement it. And I looked at the changes that I put in place in my business because of investing in that program. Like I probably went through maybe 50-60% of it in the time frame that they gave me. And so even that 60%, it encouraged me to make certain changes in my business. And I made back the investment quickly, like within 2 months. Now, did I fully implement it and reap all the promises that they told me? No.
Right.
But I'm 2 years out from doing what they told me to do 2 years ago. And I can say, if I were to really be honest, every single decision past there has been based on something that I learned, not everything, but the foundation that I learned there, the ROI, what I'm trying to say, wasn't just in that one moment.
Right.
There was an ROI that I am still reaping today because I made that decision. And so then when I hire the next person to come in, because I'm a business coach and a consultant, and I work with business coaches and consultants. Like, again, I'm not going to tell my clients to do something I don't do. So I have somebody who is ahead of me, helping me get where I want to go. And it's an investment. And so when I'm looking at that, my goal is, how do I at least recoup the money that I put in? And now how do I make it back 2-3 more times?
Yes.
And so, but it's over what time period, right? If I were to take this down into designer speak, we can also think about looking at a show house. How much do they have to put into a show house? Well, when they are reaping the reward from that, if you will, that doesn't mean that somebody's going to walk into that show house and immediately say, I love that room, I want to hire you. It could come back over time. So the same way that we are watching our numbers, we're watching our marketing. We are watching, where did this referral come from? Where did this, and it's over time. These are not just quick turnarounds in some cases. And so I'm curious, the dashboards that you have created or worked with, are they all simply financially based, or can you build dashboards pulling data from places other than QuickBooks? Right? Like I've got a whole Excel spreadsheet. Stacy Brown Randall talks about keeping up with all of your referrals. And yes, I've got my CRMs and all of that, but I've got this great Excel spreadsheet, Jack, that tells every person who's reached out to me, the date they reached out, where they were referred from, what action they took.
Perfect.
To see that in some type of a visual form immediately tells me where my marketing's working, where it's not, what they're asking for, who's sending them. And if I had looked at each individually and not collectively, either in some type of a spreadsheet or a visual representation, it's easy to miss the trends of, again, what is the payoff of that marketing, or what's the payoff of that working with that coach, things that are outside of just a P&L or a balance sheet item. Do you help work around other data that maybe we've captured in Excel spreadsheets or in other types of spreadsheets?
Yeah. So it's funny. It sounds like we scripted this. I promise we didn't, because that is my number 2 area, is to go into marketing. And
okay, cool.
Yeah, it goes into where's the leads coming from? What's the conversion rate? What's the sales cycle? That can connect to a CRM, just an Excel spreadsheet if you got everything there. For website things, Google Analytics, very easy to connect to, a whole lot of good info there. But yes, marketing is my second most common piece of data that I work with, or area of data that I work with, and it's all around that same kind of thing of measure the investment in something like an advertisement, Facebook ads, Google ads, whatever. Even different networking groups. A lot of them cost money. Are you getting leads? Are you getting referrals from that? And so yes, that is something that I absolutely love to do as well.
Yeah, I just know for me, when I'm sitting down thinking about the numbers in my business, some people have, I'm going to say this, it might sound a little controversial. I don't mean it that way. Some people have pigeonholed me and said that I'm a financial coach. And I would say, yes, I am a financial coach, but I am a holistic coach. And I say that because kind of the same thing that you're talking about here, Jack. I use the financials almost as like checking a temperature.
Right.
The numbers are there and they have meaning. It means that there were decisions that were made that created the number. And if I don't like the number, I got to go backwards and change the decision. So I can't work with somebody on just their financials and not say, let's go look at your marketing. Let's go look at your why. Let's go look at your values. Let's look at your ideal clients. Do you have the right employees or the right butts in the seat? Because every bit of that impacts that financial document. It's just a moment in time telling me about every decision. And so sometimes I'm asking for numbers that are deeper and broader and wider than what's on a P&L and a balance sheet. And I see your offering as doing the same thing. It's saying, yeah, we got these numbers, but there's a lot more happening behind the scenes to really get your arms around this ownership piece of the numbers and the data and the analytics. So here's another area I'm curious to see if you have either worked with it before or what you think about it. And that is how we manage our employees' time and time tracking, because that is a big deal for us, because we have to, whether we are charging for our time an hour at a time, like hourly billing, or whether we're doing flat fees, but we have to keep up with the time spent on a project to see if the flat fee is really correct. Really trying to determine, are our employees that are billable, are they billing at the rate that they need to be billing for the time? You know, you can even go into law or anything else and look at everybody that has to keep track of everything. Is that another area that you've seen that kind of, because when I look at, here's our time billing, and I look at that, you know, let's say I've got a design staff of 5, and I want to look at how much each of them charge on average per week. How many billable hours a week do they have? What does that translate to in a month? And then I can look over here at the P&L for that month and see, here's where we charge for our time, and know where it came from, right? The sub data behind it. Do you work, and have you seen any need or request for that?
Absolutely. Yeah. That I have one client right now who kind of ties everything together, and it starts off with the financial overview. And one of the things that we look at is kind of like what we were talking about earlier. What are some of the common things that everybody should be looking at? Is that labor expense, and typically that's an expense as a percent of revenue. However you want to look at it, that's sort of your starting point, right? That's your pulse check, and then you say, okay, who are my employees, who's doing what, and then you get into the time tracking data. So it's not meant to be like down to the exact specific second, like it doesn't have to be crazy.
Sure.
But to your point, it's that pricing piece, because a lot of people do flat fee pricing. I do myself, and I think a whole lot of people base that off of an estimated hourly rate that they want, right? So if it's going to take 10 hours and they want to make $100 an hour, okay, let's charge $1,000. So doing that flat fee is great. I think that's a phenomenal way to do business. However, it has to make sense for your hours worked as well. And some employees may be better at estimating than others. Some may be really quick. And if some people are really quick, you might want to say, okay, that seems like it didn't take you long enough. Some people could be on the other end of the spectrum. So there's a whole lot of good info in time tracking data. And you can get real granular and get down to this much of it is travel, and this much of it is planning, and then this is implementation. And that's great stuff. If you're just starting out with tracking some of that stuff, that could be overwhelming. So I would encourage everybody to do some sort of time tracking. And then once you get a feel for it, then you can get into the more granular of what is each hour spent doing for that specific client or for that specific job.
Okay, so that brings up, I just had an episode where we talked about doing cost accounting. Mm-hmm. And really, I will say the majority of my clients do not do full cost accounting. Okay. So they're not taking and tracking every single thing to every single project. They're doing time billing and that kind of thing, but they're not necessarily doing full on job costing for everything. Okay. But there is a need to know on a project by project basis, am I really making money when you take into account overhead and you take into account maybe those expense items that were not put up in cost of goods? Like it's easier to look at it and go, okay, here's what I charged in revenue. Here are my cost of goods or services, and here's my gross profit. but to really say, were we profitable when we take the whole company into account?
Yes.
And I can imagine that if you can pull data from multiple places, right, that have repositories, especially those that allow you to take the data and export it into a CSV or an Excel file, that then makes it where you can get to it, right,
Yes.
to be able to pull that data. So for example, if we have clients that are on other project management applications that are specific to the industry, to interior design or whatever, as long as we can have some of that data exported, we now have that data available
Yep.
to do some analytics on and create a dashboard. Did I get that right?
That is exactly right. Yep. CSV is one of my best friends.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. All right. So I mean, my brain is like spinning here with all of the different things that this could do. Tell me a little bit about the process when you start working. So let's say one of my designers calls you. Let's say I call you. Oh, Jack, I love numbers. I love to see it. I'm not seeing anything visual right now. I don't want to go build it myself. You know how to build it. Let me use your expertise and your, you know, all the great stuff about you to do this. You know it. Tell me the things I don't know. Lead me there. What is your process? Do you? I'm certain you go through a discovery call, or here's how I'm going to get to know you. But when we move into working together, do you ask me like, what are your KPIs? Do you ask me what are some of the questions you might ask me to make sure that we're not just building the same dashboard everybody else has, but one that, which is fine too. There's nothing wrong with having a standard dashboard that a lot of people use. It's kind of like the QuickBooks reports that we all get. Right. But if we really want to think differently and there's data that I want to capture in a different way, two questions. How do you go through that process with me? And then second, how do we layer it? Because I can imagine the minute I start getting a taste of the visual representation of my data, it becomes something different and better and bigger and more exciting because it's taken on this new look, and I'm going to want more. So tell me how that works.
Yes, absolutely. The discovery call is one of my favorite phases because I love to learn. Honestly, it's just my favorite thing. And in that discovery call, I get to learn about the client's business. So if you're a business, I would love to learn what the ins and outs are and what are the KPIs. So that's definitely one of my questions is, and we talked about one of the standard ones is just revenue and profit. That's probably going to be a KPI for most people. But let's go deeper. What's really driving your business? Is it a specific cost of goods sold metric? Is it a specific expense? Are you getting messed up with taxes? Or let's find what else is making your business tick, and then make that one of the KPIs too. So
like what makes you hurt? Like one of the questions I always ask is there something that you wish you knew in your business that you don't know? Like, is there something that you're like, if I could just put my finger on that, I feel like I would have better control, right?
Right. Exactly. Yeah. And finding that thing or a couple things, it does make a huge difference. And the revenues, the profits, the gross profits, and all the more standard stuff like that, hugely important. There's no need to neglect that by any means. So I just want to put that out there. But getting to that sort of, it's almost like the one or two metrics that could really make or break your business.
Yeah.
Identifying
There's so much more, right?
Right, exactly. Which for me, I love because it's more data and more financials and everything that I can just make visual. But yeah, so we'll have a conversation about the KPIs, and that's all of my stuff is custom. I have some like kind of standard templates, and I say kind of standard because I'll start with something like revenue and profit, and then go, okay, right. Now let's do this.
Because that's whatever. I mean, again, that I would be more worried about a company that says create a whole dashboard and don't tell me about revenues and gross profits and everything. Like I would be more concerned about them. So you just about know that's a gimme.
Right.
But I think to your point, Jack, there's so much more. Why would we stop there? Right. And I think that's where many of us have been led to believe that we can stop, is look at a P&L, look at a balance sheet, and then just be done. And good night, we would have a difficult time really scaling and growing if that's all we look at. I'm helping my clients take that and break it down and break it down and break it down. And when I do financial reviews, I'm even asking, what makes up that bucket? Like
Yep.
you got marketing and advertising and you got it at 25,000. What's in there? And you know the answer I get most often? I'm not really sure.
Let me
Okay,
look.
well, let's break it down and see what is in there. Is that a new website build? Is that ongoing? Are you paying for Google ads? Like, what are you doing? And I'm not
Right.
saying it's bad or wrong. We just have to know what it is. And
Yeah.
then we have to know, is it helping you? Is it supporting you? Is it doing what you expect it to do? Or is there a better way to do it? Is there a cheaper way to do it? Is there, or is it perfect and we leave it?
Yeah, because that is an option. We're not just here to point out the bad.
Yeah, yeah.
It's we can point out the good too. And it's kind of going back to something that we said in the beginning is if you feel like you're spending a whole lot on marketing, that's what your gut's telling you. That could be okay. But let's check out the numbers and get deep into them to see where that money's going. If you can make an ROI out of it, you probably can. But if you can't, whatever. Let's check the ROI on each of those different spend areas. And so that's back to the discovery call. That's a huge part of the discussion too. Is what is the thing that you want to see, or what are the several things that you want to see? And oftentimes that is something along those lines of, well, I'm spending 25 grand a month on marketing, but I'm not really sure where it's going. So let's spike that out and let's put some numbers around it too and make it a good, bad, okay sort of indicator.
Um, I when I spend on things like that, the marketing piece, it always makes me go like, oh my gosh, is this the right spend? Is this a good spend? Because it can be a lot. I mean, you can put thousands of dollars into ads or into, I would almost go back to, can I please just pay $300 for a Yellow Pages ad? Like back in the day when we thought that was crazy, right?
Right.
And now $300 a month is a drop in the bucket.
Right.
For a lot of advertising these days and social media and all the other avenues that we have. But I know I have a particular marketing stream that I'm using right now. And I had one sale that came out of my marketing. And that one sale would cover 24 months of continued marketing.
Wow.
And so when I realized that, I was like, one sale equals 24 months of me staying here. So even if I only get 2 in 2 years, I've made my money. Like
You're
I've more
good.
than made my money. And
Yeah.
so it's being able to stop and look at it. But every month when you're looking at that money going out the door, you're kind of like, until you stop and stand back and go, but wait a minute, look what I only had to sell one and I can fund this for 2 years. So,
Right.
it changes the way that I now see it. Now I look at it and I'm like, it's okay. I've made the money. Keep going, keep going, keep going, because we know marketing is a numbers game,
Yeah.
right? You're not necessarily going to, if you convert every single person you talk to, then you probably need to shift a little bit because you're going to get overwhelmed quickly.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. And I love that example of the one sale equals 24 months. Sometimes it's okay to go 1 for 100, and that
Yeah.
can be really discouraging. And you might just see money outflowing constantly into whatever marketing that is. But then you get that one sale, and putting that into context with the numbers definitely helps maybe ease the stress of, oh my gosh, I'm over 90. Well, just get one of the next 10 or, whatever it is.
That's right.
And then you're good to go. And just putting the numbers around that makes it increases the peace of mind for sure.
It does. Are there any other areas that you have found to be super helpful to business owners in that dashboard or in the analysis part that we haven't touched on?
The last piece, and we kind of did with the time tracking and stuff, but I like to call it the operational data.
Okay.
So oftentimes that is the time tracking piece, but for other things, it's dealing with sort of someone like, so I've dealt with a logistics company. It's how often are you on time? Does the entire load that you're hauling across the country, does it make it there? Maybe not super applicable to the interior design community, but please go on.
Well, think about it. Our project management is the logistics of ordering every single thing that goes in somebody's house.
There you go. Yeah, absolutely.
So it's the logistics of building the home, potentially what we call the finishings. What color is the stain? What color is the paint? And making those dates and making the budgets. And
Yeah.
then it is over time, logistically, did this get to the receiver on time? Did it make it there? Did we, how many installs did we do on the date that we planned for install? So it's a smaller version of what a logistics company does, but we actually have logistics positions in some of the larger design firms just for that.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, then they get their own dashboard.
That's right. I mean, I can totally see that. Even just one, I could almost see, I don't know if you've built one of these yet, but a customer satisfaction dashboard. For example, here were some of the things that we were planning to do to make our customer feel appreciated, or here were our customer touch points. Did we do it? Did we meet what, what they were looking for? And then, sending a follow-up, and here's how they ranked us, and kind of seeing, are we meeting the real needs of our clients? I mean, I could see
Yeah.
that being something that we would measure as well and want to see visually.
Absolutely. I personally have not made that dashboard yet, but I have seen several of them, and they're pretty cool because you almost steer away from the numbers a little bit. So for the non-numbers oriented folks, it's kind of a nice thing to look at, because it's oftentimes it's like the net promoter score and things like that, which is a 1 to 10 scale, nice and easy, but it's the happy face and the frowny face, and it's kind of a neat dashboard, at least the ones that I've seen. And I think from my perspective, it's all dealing with numbers on the back end and putting it again just into pictures. So I completely agree. That's a great dashboard. I should start looking more into that.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's important. I know when I was talking to a client yesterday, and we were talking about how we help our employees feel connected so that they don't want to leave and go to a competitor, right?
Right.
And one of the things that we talked about was making them understand how they fit into the company, and then making them understand how they were there to transform the life and the space of the client, and then thinking about in advance how they wanted their client to feel at certain touch points, and then managing to those touch points. Not just saying, I want him to feel this when we get here, but actually managing the feeling to get there, right? And then measuring it. So, we have to measure, just otherwise everything's a gut feeling. But
Yes.
Looking to see what is really important. So here's what I would say. Look to see what's important, a KPI, some type of performance indicator, setting up a metric to track it, and then actually looking at it and analyzing the data, which is where your solution comes in, is to help us do
Exactly.
that. It's to take that data, pull it off the page, and create it in a visual, beautiful, branded way that gives us quick information and helps us, like you said, digestible pieces, so that we know what to do with that data, and not just a bunch of flat numbers on a piece of paper that feel overwhelming to us.
That is perfectly said, Michelle. Thank you. I should hire you for sales.
I'll be right over. I'm coming.
Yeah.
Jack, tell everybody where they can find you. Tell us about your website, where you're hanging out, and how to get in touch.
So I would say online, the quickest way, or the best way rather, is just to head to my website, which is pineapplecf, as in consultingfirm.com. That's got a bunch of examples of some of the dashboards that I build. And I fully realize that what I do is very much a seeing is believing type business. So I've got videos on there. I've got screenshots on there, and it sort of shows boring data, transformation, fun data. And it's that kind of theme. You can get more info of what my actual services are and things like that. So I would say my website, pineapplecf, as in consultingfirm.com. I'm based out of Charlotte, North Carolina. So if any listeners are in Charlotte, definitely feel free, reach out, and we'll talk shop in person, assuming that's allowed in this non-COVID time.
That's exactly right. Yeah. And we do have listeners in Charlotte for sure. I've got clients there too. Jack, this is fun. Like this like rocks my boat, right? I love the numbers. I love the numbers, but I love the power of the numbers. And I know that's something that you had on your sheet too. I think I know for me that when I started my company and I didn't look at the numbers, I was doing the piece and parts that I love to do, which was the more creative piece. My energy got sucked dry, and I I felt defeated because I wasn't monitoring the numbers behind it. And it wasn't that I
Right.
didn't know how, I just wasn't doing it. And that was the thing that I had my, um, oh my goodness moment sitting at the kitchen table where I called my husband crying and I said, something's got to change here. And I decided on that day, because to your point, I had worked in big companies, but I'd not taken those principles and brought them down to more of a micro business level.
Sure.
And when I made the decision that day at the kitchen table that I'm not going to do this anymore, I'm changing it. That is, that became the beginning for everything that I'm doing today. That's how I created Pricing Without Emotion, Understanding Your Financials, Master Your Profit. Like, let the numbers work for you instead of against you. And the
Yeah.
more that I know and understand my data, the more I love my job,
Yeah.
because I can rest in those choices and decisions, and I can spend more time pouring into my clients and doing those things because I know that the foundation under me is solid. And so that's what I want for the listeners. I want them not just to earn money, not just to make good sales and good pricing and profits, but to know what to do with it and to analyze the data and to have it in a way that is easily accepted, if you will, and
Right.
understood. And so I love what you're bringing to this. And I'm so glad that in the middle of a pandemic, you started a business.
Thank you. I'm glad too. It's been, there's no chance I'm going back to the corporate world anytime soon. I'll say that.
I hear you. I hear you.
But yeah,
Well,
this was just too much fun. Thanks so much for having me, Michelle. Always love talking data and numbers and pretty graphs and stuff like that too. So thank you so much.
Same. Well, Jack, thank you so much for being here. And I'll probably be reaching out to see what I can get on a dashboard for myself.
Perfect. We'll talk then.
Take care.
You too.
Thanks, Jack, for being on the podcast today and sharing information on how we can make our data easily accessible and a snap to understand. Honestly, my goal is for all of you listening to build a business that is solid, one that supports you and your clients and your employees, a business that provides good in the world. And I know I can't do all this work alone, and neither can you. It would be my joy to support you in building a strong, kind, amazing business. Reach out to me at scarletthreadconsulting.com and sign up for a discovery call. Let's connect so that I can help you be more profitable, because profit doesn't happen by accident.